Wassalamu ala Rasulullah. I would like to welcome you all for the Pediatric Club meeting webinar, which is the 97 now, organized by the Saudi Pediatric Association. It's actually my pleasure to start my presentation by thanking Event Troop for organizing this meeting, and also to thank GSK for sponsoring this event, and also to thank Professor Abdul Mu'in Al-Agha, the coordinator of the Pediatric Club. And I'll start also to welcome our speakers and our moderator, Dr. Muhammad Farouk, who will introduce our speakers later. In the beginning, I would like to give just an introduction and welcome about the Saudi Pediatric Association, and my few slides, which is I'm going to show the here. Let's start the first slide and let's make it bigger. So Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. No, not this one. Okay, we will. Share screen. Okay, so anyhow, the Saudi Pediatric Association has been organized and established in 1981. So it is the first association in the Saudi Arabia to be established. It was initially established by Dr. Hassan Kamil, alayhi rahmatullah, who was the first dean for medical college in Riyadh. By the this was actually done by he was the dean of the college in King Saud University. The mission of the Saudi Pediatric Association is actually to improve education for all the pediatricians and health workers, and also to provide free medical education for the caregivers to improve the pediatric and the child health. Our program, or our board, consists of 9 board members who are actually doing a lot of job to improve the presentations and to improve all the aspects of pediatric care. We did so far many conferences. It's been established in one of them was quite recent, before the COVID-19 in Jeddah. But before that, all the cities in Kingdom of Saudi Arabia and also small cities being involved, starting from Tabuk to also to Medina, to Taif, to Riyadh, and as well as Al-Gunfada. And this actually all been done in the last years. And we have accredited a lot of CM hours for these events. So with this here, I would like actually to welcome you again and thank you for being with us. And I'd like actually to introduce the moderator for this event, Dr. Muhammad Farouk, who will introduce the speakers. And Dr. Muhammad Farouk, the floor is yours. Thank you.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
Share this.
والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد النبي الكريم وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم أجمعين. Thank you, Dr. Twain, for your introduction. And also on behalf of all attendees and my colleagues, would like to thank you and all the members of the association, centrally and in the Western region, for your efforts in actually helping all of my colleagues, all the doctors and the patients under your care there. Thank you very much. And for facilitating all of these webinars, which is now, we've reached 97th, which is really a credit to your efforts. I mean, and locally, both your efforts and Prof. Domina's efforts itself. So thank you on behalf of everybody. Now we're going to start the scientific program. And as mentioned, the theme of tonight's webinar is actually about vaccinations, catch-up vaccinations, especially with some emphasis on vaccinations in the COVID-19 era. As you know, from the beginning of this year, we've been facing a lot of challenges in fighting the COVID-19 virus and the epidemic which it has produced. The fight included the implementation of widespread restrictions on our social mobility, namely quarantines and lockdowns. And that had led to really a major impact on the health delivery systems in our country and many countries itself. And as you know, as you healthcare providers, you have faced many challenges in how trying to provide proper health care to your patients and your children, and most notably in the area of vaccination. So now that things are starting to improve and things are starting to ease up and patients are coming back, a lot of you are starting to ask, okay, what do we do with all these missing schedules or disrupted schedules and no vaccines or whatever? Should we start from the beginning, continue, modify the schedule? How do you modify it itself? Is it safe actually to vaccinate children while the epidemic or the virus is still lurking in the shadows? Is it actually safe to bring the children to the clinics and start vaccinating them? All of these questions and much, much more are going to be addressed by two of our eminent speakers. So to answer your questions, the association has really invited two eminent speakers, Dr. Hana Bakh and Dr. Mona Dabbagh. And inshallah, tonight, they'll try to talk on tackle these issues and answer your questions itself. And so with much ado, we're going to start our webinar. And our first speaker is Dr. Hana Bakh. Dr. Hana Bakh is a graduate from King Abdulaziz Medical College. She is holder of both the Arab Board in Pediatrics and the Fellowship in Pediatric Infectious Disease from King Faisal Specialty Hospital. She is a pediatric infectious disease consultant at East Jeddah General Hospital. And she's going to be talking to us tonight. And she has a lot of actually work on fighting the AIDS virus and trying to control it itself here in the Western region itself. She's going to talk tonight about catch-up vaccination. So with much ado, I lend the floor or the screen to Dr. Hana Bakh. So, Dr. Hana Bakh.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. My voice is clear?
Yes.
Bismillah wa salatu wa salam ala Sayyidina Rasulillah. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I should thank the organizing committee. Thanks for Dr. Aga to choose this nice, important, very common and a bit complicated issue. and we'll try our best to simplify things, inshallah, for everybody. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. First slide. Can you see the slide?
Yes.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
clear.
So, our objectives for today, after introduction, we will just have a quick history for the global and local expanded program of immunization. Then we will go for the catch-up vaccination in principle and recommendation for two age group between the early childhood, 4 months to 6 through 6 years, and for the late childhood and adolescent between 7 years through the 18 years. As everybody knows that the types of the vaccine, it's 5 types of vaccine: live attenuated, inactivated, killed, toxoid, polysaccharides conjugate, or recombinant. Again, there is 5 modes of injection. It could be intradermal or intranasal. 5 the vaccines have oral, like polio, typhoid, rota, adeno, and cholera. And the majority or the rest of the vaccines are either intramuscular or subcutaneous. Almost all of them has efficacy, immunogenicity of almost 100%. But unfortunately, as it was mentioned by Mr. Chairman, Dr. Muhammad, that vaccine is not an easy issue to be covered globally in general, and particularly after the COVID-19 era. So it was mentioned by the World Immunization Week on 2020 that there is a decrease in API coverage for the DTP and measles. I'm not going to go through this. Maybe Dr. Ramona is going to elaborate more about this issue. What about the local history in Saudi Arabia and the EPI program? First of all, it is a free national program, and they have to make sure that all the children, whether they are eligible or not eligible, Saudi or non-Saudi, they should be covered for their vaccination for more than 40 years. And the birth certificate is not going to be issued if the baby did not receive at least the first 6-month vaccination since 1979. 3 years later, they expand the coverage to make sure that the measles coverage will be well covered. So the birth certificate will be issued by the age of 9 months on 1982. The first uniform of ABI was released 9 years later on 1991. And then there is a 3 modification of the expanded program of immunization in Saudi Arabia. Had some modification between 2002 till 2020. So if we are going to speak about the catch-up vaccination, we really need just to review what is the basic immunization currently is going in Saudi Arabia. So in order to explain how is the catch-up vaccination is going to be later on. On 1991, as you can see that the measles, the first dose of measles, it was given at 6 months of age, and the first dose of MMR at 12 months. 3 years later, they just modify the vaccination by adding the HIP type 2, the Haemophilus influenza type B was added, and they cancel the 6-month measles vaccine, and they add the first booster of MMR by the end of the 2nd year of life. What about the ABI of the 2009? They add more vaccines, the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine with the 7 serotypes, and they again return the measles vaccine, but at 9 months for a better coverage. And they add also the hepatitis A vaccine and varicella. 11 years later, and this is the current and the final, they add the rotavirus, they change the pneumococcal vaccine 7 serotypes to the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine 13 serotypes, and the DTaP, which is acellular pertussis, was introduced. 3 doses of injectable polio and 4 doses of oral polio vaccines, as well as the meningococcal vaccine and meningococcal vaccine, yes, and maybe the MMR by the age of 4 to 6 years, which is the second booster for the MMR, as well as adolescent vaccination by the age of 11, 12, and 18. We will go through each in detail. This is the old vaccination card. This is the new one for the pediatric age group, and this is for the adult age group. So what we are speaking about for today, it is catch-up vaccination. What does it mean? It is simply any immunization given after the recommended age called catch-up immunization. And as Dr. Muhammad mentioned, we are facing this problem almost in a daily basis. It's a common problem. A lot of query from the parents come, we are a bit late for the vaccination, whether it's partial or complete late for the immunization. Shall we give all again or start from the middle? To make it more simple for everybody, we really need to speak about the principle first. So we have to explore the reason for the delay, missing, or interrupted vaccination, whether due to illness or frequent moving by traveling, or with the refugees or disturbance at the home life. So we have to set up a plan with the parents, discuss the things thoroughly, supported with evidence-based medicine, and we have to make sure that everything is written, whether by paper or electronically, dated, recorded. Otherwise, we will not accept an immunization not written. We should really count all the previous doses, including the birth vaccine. Full vaccination means full immunity, so we should not ignore the booster dose. If it happened accidentally that revaccination or extra dose was given, it is no harm of it, no evidence supporting any harm from this. So our job is really to immediate initiation of the missed vaccines according to the current age and with a minimal age and interval of all doses. In case, just in case, if one of the vaccine missed or there is a delayed during our catch-up immunization, it's not a big deal. We can consider it as just an elapse. Elapse does not mean that we need to require reinitiation of vaccination or additional dose by the end of the series. So we have to be a bit meticulous and look at it in a more detailed way. So we have to go back for the whole recommendation from the WHO, CDC, and ACIP, particularly for the catch-up immunization. What did they recommend? They stratified in 2 groups: early childhood from 4 months to 6 years, and the late childhood at adolescent from 7 years to 18 years. And this is a very busy table. We are going to make it more simpler by take it one by one for each vaccine in two late and early childhood period. So if we start with the hepatitis B vaccine, as you can see here, there is a missing part of this slide. Anyway, this part is for the early age, first 6 years of age, and this is for the second adolescent and late childhood. It should be 3 doses of the hepatitis B vaccine for the two period of time, early and late childhood, between the first and second dose of the vaccination, it should be 4 weeks. Between the second and third vaccine, it should be 8 weeks. And the total between the first and third dose, it should not exceed 16 weeks. The last dose should be given by 24 months. Regarding the rotavirus, it's very, very, very important to know that the age group, it is not from 4 months to 6 years. It should be started as early as 6 weeks, and then should not start it if the age of the baby is 15 weeks. So we can start the immunization initially and between the first and second dose. I think the slide as if it is reversed upside down. This is the age. 6 weeks is as early as 6 weeks and as late as 8 months for the last dose. No vaccines if the baby is 15 weeks. So the maximum dose, the maximum age for the first dose is by the age of 14 weeks and 6 days. And then followed by the second dose 4 weeks after, and the third dose 4 weeks after. Make sure that the age at the final dose not exceeding 8 months. Regarding the DTaP, again, we are speaking about 5 doses, 3 initial and 2 boosters for the 2 period of time, early and late childhood, between the first and the second. I don't know why the slide is reversed. We should start from here. This is the first dose as early as possible, then followed by the second dose 4 weeks after, third dose as 4 weeks after from the second dose, and then the 2 booster 6 months from the 6 months from the third dose and another 6 months from the fourth dose. Same is true for the late period, but we have just to clarify certain things, that if the last dose given, the third dose given after 1 year of age, it should be considered as a final and no booster. And for the early childhood, no need for the second booster if the age of the fourth dose is 4 years of age or more. Regarding the polio virus vaccine, again 3 doses for the 2 period of time, early and late childhood, with 1 booster for the first period, which is the early childhood. If the third dose is given above or at the age of 4 years, it should be considered as a final. Otherwise, booster can be given at the age of 4 years if he is still not exceeding 4 years. For the first year, for the second period, which is the late childhood and adolescent, again, if the third dose is given by the age of 4 or more years, no need for the booster. And that's all about the slide. Regarding the pneumococcal vaccine, the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, 13 serotypes from 2 years to 5 years. Sorry, from 2 months till 5 years. Here the age, yeah, thanking God that now it is not reversed. We should stratify it a bit more because this is really very important, the pneumococcal vaccine, and it carries a lot of mortality and morbidity, so it is really important. Regarding the first 6 months of life in the first year, if no dose is received, we have to give 3 doses of the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, 13 serotypes, 2 weeks apart, and the 4th dose, it is between 12 and 15 months. If the baby receives only 1 dose during this period of the time in the first half of his first year, he should receive the 2 doses. Where we are, the 2 doses, sorry, of the vaccine, again with the booster by the age of 1 year to 15 months. If he received 2 doses, so we are lifting with 1 more dose, it should be 8 weeks after with the booster. What about if the patient presents by the 7 to 11 months of age? If he did not receive any vaccines, he should receive 2 doses as initial 4 weeks apart, and the third dose at the age of 12 months. If he received 1 or 2 vaccines in the second half of the first year, so he should have an extra 1 dose and then a booster by the age of, again, 12 to 15 months. What about the second year, from the 12 to 23 months of life? Again, if he did not receive any, 2 doses is enough, 8 weeks apart. If 1 dose received below 1 year, 2 doses with 2 weeks apart. If he received 1 dose but above 1 year, so we are satisfied with 1 dose after the first dose by 8 weeks. If he received 2 to 3 doses, then 1 dose is enough for him. What about if the baby came by the age of 2 years, 2 to 5 years? We should really give 1 dose extra apart from the previous dose he received, 8 weeks between them. For the healthy children, sorry, we are speaking about healthy children because immune compromised patient will have really a wide spectrum, different immunological degree of deficiency. So each case should be taken alone, but at least we can mention quickly after the age of 2 years till the 18, for the high-risk group, we should include not only the pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, but also the polysaccharides, pneumococcal polysaccharides vaccine with the 23 serotypes after the age of 2 years. This is simply to just summarize, if the baby came between 2 years to 6 years, what we have to do, if he did not receive any, if he did not receive any dose, if he received 4 doses of a pneumococcal conjugate vaccine, we just need to add 1 polysaccharide 23 serotypes at the age of 2 years, 8 weeks apart. If he received 3 doses, so we have to give 1 dose conjugate 13 and 1 dose polysaccharide 23. If he received 2 doses only, so 2 doses of a conjugate 13, 8 weeks apart, and 1 dose of a polysaccharides. So it is, seem to be busy slide, but it is a simple thing. What about the late childhood period, 6 years to 18, for especially just for immune compromised patient, if they did not receive any vaccine, whether it is conjugate or a polysaccharide, so we have to give 1 dose of a conjugate 13, followed by 1 dose of a polysaccharides 8 weeks apart, and maybe we should consider a second dose of a polysaccharides after the first 5 years. Meningococcal vaccine, again, it is 2 doses. We should give first dose. Sorry, the voice should be more. I cannot hear you, Mr. Chairman. So the meningococcal vaccine, again, 2 shots for 8 weeks apart for the 2 periods of time, late and early childhood period. It should be started at 9 months. And if we are speaking about the meningococcal vaccine or 2, it should be given by the age of 2 years. MMR, again, 2 doses started by 12 months, 4 weeks apart for the 2 periods of time, late and early childhood. Varicella, same, 2 doses, 3 months apart, started by the age of 12 months. But if the child is more than 13 years, so we can just give a space between the 2 doses by 4 weeks only. Hepatitis A, again, 2 doses, started by 12 months of age, with the 6-month period between the first and second dose for 2 periods of time. Human papilloma virus, of course, it is not valid for the early childhood, and the early age for it is 9 years, but the recommendation for the late period of childhood, routinely, it should be given between 11 to 12 years, and the 3 series of vaccination, 0, 1 to 2, and 6 months. For the female, the HPV2 and HPV4 can be given, but for the male, HPV4 only. For the catch-up vaccination for the human papilloma virus, for the age of 13 to 18 years, if partially vaccinated, so we can repeat the 3 doses, but the interval is 0, 1, and 4 months, so minimal interval of a total of 5 months. And if we are not sure about one of the doses, it can be repeated if the period is not 0, 1, 4. If it is shorter than that, we have to repeat the extra dose. Human papilloma virus vaccine can be given to immune-compromised patients like HIV, sexually abused with the 3 series of doses, but not for pregnant lady. So in a summary, we really need to simplify the things. We have 2 periods of time, the primary, which is the early child, the primary vaccination, and the booster. In the first 6 months of life, it's mandatory for 3 doses and 1 booster after 6 months. In the second year, in the second half of the first year, 2 doses and 1 booster in 2 months. Between 2 years and 5 years, we should give 2 doses and 2 months apart from each other. So the take-home message, our children really is going to return back to school soon. Catch-up vaccination should be really completed to be safe from contagious disease, not only from the COVID-19. So it's not a matter of standard precaution, but it's a matter of how far we can help them to survive. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Hana Baksh, of this overview of the catch-up vaccination schedule. I'm going to postpone the questions to the end in the Q&A sessions. Those who want to ask a question, please write your question. And if you want to credit, you add your name for in the Q&A section itself. And we'll try to provide these questions to the speakers at the very end after the second speaker itself. So now we move on to the second speaker. The second speaker is Dr. Mona Addabal. Dr. Mona Addabal is also holder of the Arab Board Certificate in Pediatrics. She did her clinical fellowship in pediatric infectious disease in the Children's Hospital in British Columbia, Vancouver, Canada. She also holds a master in Health Sciences and Clinical Epidemiology from BC also, and did her clinical fellowship in transplant infectious diseases, 2 fellowships, one at the University of Alberta in Canada, and one in the University of Toronto in Ontario, Canada too. She is presently Associate Professor of Pediatrics at the King Abdulaziz Medical Center at the King's Road, actually, University itself, at King Abdulaziz Medical Center in the National Guard itself. And she will be talking to us tonight on the uptake of routine childhood vaccinations in the COVID-19 era itself. So with much ado, Dr. Mona, please.
Thank you so much, Prof. Farouk. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
That's great. That's great. So first of all, I'd like to أبدأ بالصلاة على سيدنا محمد وعلى آل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين. And then I'd like to really thank the organizing committee for inviting me to give such an important talk at the Pediatric Club meetings. So what I'm going to talk about today is the uptake of routine childhood vaccination in the era of COVID-19. So the objectives of my talk the first objective is to identify the causes attributing to the change in childhood vaccine uptake during COVID-19 pandemic, and then to outline the impact of COVID-19 on childhood vaccination with special emphasis on local data, and then to discuss the possible strategies for catch-up immunization during COVID-19 pandemic. So starting with a brief introduction, Vaccines were described in 2007 as one of the great medical milestones in the preceding 160 years. They have they have been estimated to avert between 2 to 3 million deaths each year. They are proven tools for controlling and eliminating life-threatening infections. And this protection is greatly reduced if vaccine schedules are delayed or incomplete. And it's very important to highlight that effective immunization system really relies on functioning health facilities and stable communities to be effective. So what about coronavirus disease outbreak? Just briefly, coronavirus, basically, or SARS-CoV-2, it's a single-stranded enveloped RNA virus that belongs to the family Coronaviridae. And it's one of the four very well-known coronaviruses. One of them is the common cold coronavirus, and then there is the SARS coronavirus and the coronavirus associated with MERS-CoV infection, and the SARS-CoV-2 that is associated with the current COVID-19 pandemic. So the COVID-19 outbreak timeline, actually the disease was first reported in December 2019 in Wuhan, China, and then it was declared as a public health emergency for international concern in January 2020. And afterwards, in March of this year, the World Health Organization announced the COVID-19 outbreak as a pandemic disease. So we all know that control of COVID-19 transmission relies really on three main actions. So the first one is proper hand hygiene. The second is use of face masks. And the third is physical distancing. And this physical distancing was associated with lockdowns as per the leadership in order to try to control the infection transmission. So two things together, they work together. So both the lockdown and because of overwhelming COVID-19 transmission and disease, the health system, the COVID-19 led to health system constraints. So both lockdowns and health system constraints can have unintended negative consequences on access to routine essential health services. So let's look at this. I know that this is a quite complicated figure. However, let's focus on the relationship between lockdown and COVID-19. So if we relate these two things together, we can see that there is a balanced loop between lockdown and COVID-19, because the more the cases of COVID-19 disease, the more where the leadership will plan for lockdowns, and when lockdown happens, the cases of COVID-19 decrease. So this is a balanced loop. But let's look at COVID-19. There is also indirect relationship, indirect effects. So these are the direct effects, but there are some indirect effects that all affect the utilization of vaccine uptake. And this is the main talk of me now. So we know that with increased number of COVID-19, this affects the healthcare workers' availability for essential healthcare services, because most of those healthcare workers will be directed to serve patients with COVID-19 rather than do other less urgent stuff. Okay. In addition, the more the COVID-19 cases are, the more where health facilities providing routine essential health services will be diminished. Okay. In addition, with increased cases of COVID-19, immunization funding is going to decrease, and that is because most of the fund will be directed toward COVID-19 research rather than immunization. Okay, maybe COVID immunization, but not routine immunizations. When we look at lockdown does affect caregivers' utilization of healthcare services, because they're locked down, they cannot access health services. In addition, lockdown affects public transportation, and this by itself, again, it affects caregiver utilization. Okay, lockdown also has its effect on vaccine logistics and supply chain. And when the vaccine logistics and supply chain is affected, then the availability of vaccine is affected, and indirectly utilization of the vaccine is affected as well. So as you can see, lockdown really affects all together. They affect the utilization of vaccine. In addition, lockdown has its own informal effect on economy, which on its own leads to maybe poverty, maybe affection of socioeconomic status, and accordingly affecting utilization and availability of vaccines. So talking about COVID lockdown and uptake of vaccines, let's look at data from England. So this study was done to examine the effect of lockdown on uptake of vaccines. And they looked specifically at MMR vaccine and the hexavalent vaccine. So basically, that is when week 8, that was in February, that's when the lockdown was implemented. And what they did, they checked the uptake of MMR vaccine uptake 3 weeks after the lockdown. And as you can see in this figure, and they compared actually to the year 2020 with the year 2019. So the blue line is the 2019 and the brown line is 2020. So as you can see that 3 weeks after lockdown, the uptake and the number of doses of MMR vaccine have reduced by 19.8% compared to the year before. However, looking at hexavalent uptake 3 weeks after lockdown hadn't dropped much. This report is from the US. They did a pretty much similar thing. They looked at the uptake of vaccines with the COVID-19 pandemics, and they looked at the month of May. They compared the month of May 2020 going backwards to 2016. And they looked at the uptake of vaccines at different time intervals. So at 1 month, 3 months, 5 months, this is from at age, okay? 7 months, 16 months, 19 months, and 24 months. As you can see, the 2020 is the black. You can see that the 1 month representation of vaccine uptake hadn't been affected much, and that is because the 1 month reflects the vaccine that's given at birth, which is the hepatitis B vaccine. This vaccine is supposed to be taken in hospital, so under healthcare supervision, and thus it should not be affected. But let's look at the vaccines afterwards. So at 3 months, 5 months, 7 months, you can see that there was a drop of vaccine uptake afterwards, all through at different age groups for the year 2020. And there was also 15.5 reduction in the doses during January to April compared with the same average period in 2018 and 2019. So what about Saudi Arabia? This table was adopted from the World Health Organization data, and as you can see, the last update was of July, and the data of 30th of June. So this basically represents the coverage of different vaccines until very recently. So you can see that the coverage actually hadn't been much different compared to different previous years, except for the BCG vaccine. Maybe we're going to talk this in the coming couple of slides. So we're talking about the coverage. The coverage is okay. However, let's look at the number of doses given. Okay, so this is looking at the most recent numbers compared to 2018. So this represents numbers until the 30th of June. So you can see that the number of doses taken, okay, had declined from 500,000 to 450,000 for those who received 3 doses of DPT vaccine. If we look at those who received 3 doses of poliovirus vaccine, you can see also that the number of doses has decreased from around 550,000 doses to 450,000 doses. If we look at BCG, there was a very significant drop in the number of doses, but this can be very well explained, big part because of the recent changes in our immunization schedule, where we moved the uptake of the BCG vaccine from birth until to be given at 6 months of age. So I believe a big part of this decline is explained by this change of our local immunization schedule. Looking at those who received 2 doses of the meningococcal vaccine, you can also see decline in the number of doses from above 500,000 to around something around 400,000. The same thing for those who received 3 doses of the pneumococcal vaccine and for those who received rotavirus vaccine. This study was also conducted in Saudi Arabia and Qasim. And it showed the impact of COVID-19 pandemic on routine childhood immunization in Saudi Arabia. So this study was a cross-sectional study. It included around 750 subjects, and they looked at the uptake of vaccines from the time of April, for the months of March, April, May, until June 2020. So they looked, basically, it was a questionnaire that was distributed to parents and asked them about those who missed the vaccines. So you can see for the 2 months vaccine, around 10% reported not missing the doses. The same applies for 6 months. You can see that there was 17% here. For 12 months, 17% who missed their vaccines, and etc. Overall, 47% of the parents actually did report delay of immunization for more than 2 weeks, and around 23% reported delay for more than 1 month. When these parents were questioned about reasons for vaccine delay, as you can see, around 60% reported that the delay of vaccination was mainly attributed to fear to get infected with COVID-19. So what? So what's the problem? So what if vaccines are delayed? Actually, in May of this year, the World Health Organization announced that at least 80 million children under the age, under 1 are at risk of disease such as diphtheria, measles, polio, as COVID-19 disrupts routine vaccination efforts. So if COVID affects their immunization, then this poses children to develop one of the vaccine preventable diseases. This study was conducted in Africa, and it's actually a very nice study. It's more of a statistical, they did a lot of testing and statistics to examine the benefit and risk of giving vaccines, of the childhood vaccines during the COVID-19 pandemic. What they tried to do is to compare between those people or children, to be more specific, that the likelihood of death averted by vaccination, death from one of the vaccine preventable infections, okay, versus death okay, from COVID-19. They tried to assess the risk, the benefit risk, okay? So the way it was calculated, they calculated this risk, potential risk, based on country-specific mortality rate with that specific vaccine preventable infection. So let's say they calculated the diphtheria, the country-specific mortality or case fatality rate due to diphtheria infection, tetanus infection, pertussis infection, etc. So as you can see, that the calculated death that can be averted by vaccine for diphtheria vaccine is around 12,000 or 13,000, whereas the likelihood of death from COVID-19 is around 6,000. Okay, whereas if you look at other infections like tetanus, so we're talking about death from tetanus of around 69,000 compared to death from COVID-19 of 5,600 cases. The death rate from other infections like Haemophilus influenza is around 54,000 compared to 5,700 deaths from COVID-19. So you can see very much that these numbers tell you that death from one of those vaccine preventable infections can be much higher in pediatric population. In addition to that, what they tried doing, because as we mentioned earlier, that people reported that they don't want to seek health services because of their fear from acquiring COVID disease, I'm sorry. So they tried in this study also to assess the possible risk of death from COVID because of going to healthcare services to take the vaccine. Okay, what they found is that for every one excess COVID-19 death attributed to the SARS-CoV-2 infection acquired during routine vaccination clinic visits, 84 deaths in children could be prevented by sustaining routine childhood immunization in Africa. Again, this study, as I said, so these estimates were calculated based on different country-specific mortality rates, which are different from here. But again, you can conclude from all of these that taking the routine vaccination is really, really, really crucial. This map shows the benefit-risk ratio for taking routine childhood immunization. So the darker the color is, okay, that means that benefit of vaccination is more than the risk. And as you can see, this was all showing you that the benefit in Africa for taking the routine childhood immunization really outweighs the risk of death from COVID-19. In addition to that, there are many reports in the literature that talk about additional benefit of immunization with routine childhood vaccines, that where they mentioned that herd immunization with childhood vaccines may provide protection against COVID-19. Why is that? And is that really accurate? It deserves really further investigation in better, maybe randomized clinical trials. However, there are a bunch of data in the literature that talks about about potential cross-reactivity, cross-protection in cellular immunity and humoral immunity. And most of the data, there is a lot of data talking about MMR vaccine per se, that it can give cross-protective immunity to COVID-19. How accurate is this? Still deserves further investigation, but this can be an additional benefit to continuing childhood immunization. So what to do? What to do? Now we're facing problems. Vaccine uptake have declined, and we have to give, all the data I presented does show that there is really significant harm from emerging or resurgence, maybe a better word to use, of vaccine preventable infections. So what to do? So there has to be strategies for implementing programs during COVID-19 pandemics in order to give childhood vaccines. And for those who had missed opportunities, they will need to receive catch-up immunizations, as Dr. Hana presented earlier. So the World Health Organization has its own strategy for a missed opportunity for vaccination called MOVE. And in this strategy, they ask three main questions. The first question, how many opportunities are missed? Second question is, why are these opportunities being missed? So we have to ask, put all the potential answers to these questions and what can be adjusted or done differently in order to overcome this problem. So the World Health Organization, as per the MOVE strategy, they have focused on three main ideas. Okay, and this is it's called the 10-step process. So the first one is to plan and prepare for the MOVE strategy. Here you need to plan for the MOVE assessment and to prepare for field work and secure funding. The second category is to conduct the field work. And here you have to collect field data, or maybe, sorry. So when we talk about plan and prepare for the MOVE strategy, we have to ask questions. We have to ask, to identify who has been missed, who are the people that missed their routine vaccinations, and we have to detect delivery gaps. What are the gaps, and in order to find a solution to these gaps. The second category is to conduct the field work. Here, this is where you collect field data, analyze data, identify key themes, and brainstorm on proposed interventions and develop an action plan and debrief to a Ministry of Health and partners. In this area, you can adapt and adjust and develop multi-pronged tailored strategies for catch-up. Okay. The third category is to implement and monitor interventions. So you investigated, you found what are the problems, where are the problems, try to test and investigate these problems and fix them. And after you fix them, you try to test what you have done. So implement and monitor the interventions. You implement agreed on interventions, provide supportive and supervision and monitoring progress, conduct rapid impact evaluation, and incorporate into long-term health immunization system improvement plans. And in here, you communicate, you document, and evaluate. And after you evaluate, you readjust the immunization program in order to achieve best results and go back to your normal immunization coverage. So to conclude, immunization is considered as a top global health investment priority that should be maintained with high coverage rate. Integrating systems and implementing science in health planning could help countries gain a better understanding of the influence of COVID-19 on childhood immunization, and thus facilitating the implementation of evidence-based strategies to improve access to childhood vaccines. And early childhood vaccination could have a protective effect on COVID-19 that deserves further investigation. This is the end of my talk. Thank you so much.
صوت دكتور محمد.
Unmute, Muhammad.
Sorry. Thank you, Dr. Mona, for your interesting talk and for actually giving us advice about actually the impact of this COVID-19 on the vaccination rates here locally and internationally, and what strategies needs to be implemented really in order to ameliorate the effects of this pandemic, and so that we don't see any reemergence of these vaccine preventable illnesses itself. So now we'll start receiving the questions, and actually I started receiving already some questions to Dr. I'll present them in chronological order. So not surprisingly, the earlier questions probably will go to Dr. Hana Bakhsh itself, and we'll go on. I'm going to present it in a chronological order. First question, and I think that goes to Dr. Hana Bakhsh, is from Dr. Laila Al-Waddah, I think. What about OPV? How do you include it in the catch-up vaccination, or is just giving IPV, which is already included in the vaccine, is enough? You need to add still OPV?
So can we clarify the question, please? The question about the oral polio vaccine. Yes.
Yeah, in the catch-up, you already include IPV. Is that enough, or you need also give OPV?
No, it is not mentioned. It is not mentioned in the recommendation to give the oral. In fact, we are shifting from the oral to injectable in the schedule, but we should not go back for the catch-up with the oral. So injectable is enough.
Okay.
This is the recommendation from the WHO, because I'm sure that they reach up to this conclusion because of the paralysis which happened to the children after the oral polio. It was not mentioned at all that we have to give the oral, only the injectable. This is according to the recommendation.
Yeah, the rationale about OPV was just that to keep it within the community itself, so at least the wild virus doesn't come back itself. But anyway, okay, I think IPV probably might be enough.
But if we are going to give five shots of the injectable, 3 doses and 2 booster, at least for the early period of childhood, which is up to 6 years, this will be enough. 5
okay, so IPV is enough then. Okay.
Yeah.
Now, regarding the BCG vaccine, if you have a child 4 years and above and not received it, should we give it? That's by Dr. Suzanne El-Malki.
Yeah, it is not recommended. Again, this is, I'm just elaborating the things from the CDC, the WHO, and the ACIP, the Advisory Committee of Immunization Program. They did not really elaborate more about the BCG.
Okay.
Maybe it is not well studied. Maybe Dr. Mona or somebody can answer this question, because
okay, Dr. Mona, would you like to share?
Yeah. So the BCG actually is not a vaccine that's given in the US, so it won't be in the ACIP recommendations because they don't give it in the US. The benefit of the BCG vaccine is mainly for those children who are less than 2 years of age, and because the benefit of the vaccine, the effect of the vaccine is mainly to prevent from developing disseminated BCG, disseminated tuberculosis or TB meningitis. So this disease, if TB or TB meningitis or disseminated TB occurs, it occurs in children who are less than 2 years. So after the age of 2, okay, there is really no benefit of giving the vaccine, of the BCG vaccine. And as per the Ministry of Health here, with the recent change that happened with the changing the BCG vaccine from being given at birth to 6 months, the MOH recommendation is not to give the vaccine after 1 year of age. And can I add also something for the oral polio?
Yes, you can.
Yes, go ahead.
Yeah. So as I recall, as the World Health Organization does recommend in countries where there is possibility of acquiring wild disease can happen. And when they talk about this, they're talking about countries where there is a lot of immigration. Okay, if there is a possibility, then they recommend to give at least 1 dose of oral polio vaccine. So Saudi Arabia, if we look specifically at the Western region, I do believe that we see a lot of, because of Hajj and Umrah, a lot of immigration. So I would say at least give 1 dose of oral polio vaccine in the Western region.
So maybe we modify our schedule and we should not just follow the whole recommendation from the US, the USA, exactly.
Right. هو لأنه USA it's tailored for them, but this recommendation of giving at least 1 dose of oral polio vaccine is from the World Health Organization.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah, but it's basically not for individual, but just to ensure that the wild virus doesn't come back in the community in itself.
Sure.
Okay, so and we used to, the Minister of Health used to do that by just this mass campaign. I mean, every year or every 2 years, you can just give 1 dose to everybody. I mean, so that can deal with this actually defect in our local problem. But as an individual basis, probably IPV might be enough for the individual child.
Absolutely.
Okay, right. So I'm not going to go into BCG vaccination. Whether that's actually going to be protective against COVID, but actually move to another question. Dr. Zuhair Rahbini is actually asking, is there an APPS/computer program by filling the information to help the non-specialized MD to figure out the catch-up doses in future? I mean, can actually a program that you can fill in the information and they can just spell out all the diseases that need to be actually given? Is there an app on the market for that, or one being developed? Is any of you know of any such programs?
I'm not aware myself.
Not for me. No. But I'm sure that the Ministry of Health, maybe they have this program.
I think one of the organizations in the States actually had which actually figures the regular vaccines, because they give vaccines individually in a sense, and it tailors each vaccination schedule for each person itself. So, but I'm not sure if it's sophisticated like what this doctor is asking itself. So sorry, we cannot actually, we might need to look it up and give you an answer later, inshallah.
Yeah.
Now, Dr. Dua, sorry, that's about the certificates. Now, Dr. Imtinan Muhammad, if the baby was preterm, born in 37 weeks, can he be vaccinated like a term child?
Yeah, he's almost near term. 37 is not a big problem for vaccination. Yeah, especially if his weight is more than 2 kilo or more. But for the extreme preterm with the birth weight is small, we should really wait until the age of 1 month. Then he catch up with his weight, and then we can give the full dose of the vaccine. There is nothing called half dose, but at least we can wait until his weight is catching up. So it can be delayed for a month for extreme preterm, but for the near-term baby, 37 weeker and weight is 2 kilo or more, he can receive all doses, full doses and interval.
Okay, the Dr. Rania Al-Zayyad, is there any available online catch-up vaccination schedule? As so much on its site, they have their main schedule, but is there one for catch-up vaccination?
In Saudi Arabia or in general?
Well, this is a general question, but I was just asking also whether it's one available for on the MOH site.
Well, I have all my knowledge from the internet and from the website. Maybe I have to put the reference from the Red Book and from the recommendation of the CDC and the WHO and
Okay.
IP. It's all from the net.
And also somebody else is Dr. Damia El-Safadi, or Daniel El-Safadi should be. Thanks, Dr. Hana. I would like to ask regarding the best reference for vaccination of children with special circumstances, as after receiving IVG or during high dose of steroid treatment, etc. Thanks.
Yeah, it is mentioned, in fact, in the website, the same website, and it is very clearly written in the Red Book as well. But it's a big issue, so I cannot cover it really in this 20 or 30 minutes. But it is there, Dr. Dania. And I can provide it for you if you like, inshallah.
Dr. Muhammad Sadiq Omar, is influenza vaccine has any protection against COVID-19? Maybe Dr. Mona might.
I believe I saw one report that was hypothesizing this, but it's just a hypothesis. It's the same idea of other vaccines as well. So there is hypotheses that cross immunity and protection, but there is nothing proven yet. We should not assume that. But giving the vaccine more or less is going to protect from influenza, and this on its own is a desirable thing to do during the current season.
And is the influenza vaccine, the new one, is supposed to be here in October, is that available for locally?
I don't think so, not yet. Usually it comes at the end of October.
Yeah, I think it is available. One of my friends here, they receive it and they ask me about it.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't heard, not even, talking about where I work.
Now, Dr. Zuhair Rahmini, who's a clinical geneticist, what is your recommendation of vaccinations for metabolic patients who have elements of immunodeficiency?
Again, this category, not all inborn error of metabolism, they have a degree of immune deficiency. Some of them has a degree of, they are compromised in a way they have a fungal infection rather than bacterial or viral. So it really should be stratified according to the type. And I really did not cover this issue in particular, but it is written very nicely in the Red Book. Maybe we will communicate with Dr. Zuhair as well.
Or Dr. Mohammed Al-Bagashi, is HPV vaccine indicated for female adolescents in the absence of history of sexual abuse?
Well, it is recommended by the Ministry of Health, and as I understand, for a couple of years, it already started in King Faisal Specialist Hospital in Riyadh. So it is one of the scheduled Kingdom of Saudi Arabia in the schedule. But we re-emphasize that the high-risk group like HIV or who has sexual insult, they are indicated to have this, strong indication to have this vaccine if they are not received, if they did not receive it.
And
Can
also,
I add one more thing? Sorry.
Yeah.
So the idea behind HPV vaccine is to be given before sexual activity. So it's supposed to be given before sexual activity, and that's why it's not really recommended in older age group. There are studies where the HPV vaccine was given to women at the early 20s, but the idea of HPV is to give them, provide them with immunity from the HPV before starting sexual activity. So it's not really related to sexual assault, but as Dr. Hana exactly mentioned, sexual assault is an indication, definite indication to give them vaccine. But the idea is that the vaccine has to be given before start of sexual activity.
Exactly.
And also on the issue of HPV, Dr. Daniel Safadi also is asking, where is HPV given to children? Is it available at PHCs of MOH? Primary health centers, and is it available or just?
Wallahi, I'm not sure about it, but at least it is recommended. But in real practice, is it available or not? I did not dig to this issue. It's a good question, Dr. Dania. I have to ask again specifically.
Dr. Ghulam Nabi, this is for all, actually, my question, actually for Dr. also Muna here, he said, should we change the timing of BCG vaccine back from 6 months to birth, again, in view of promising reports about COVID-19? I think he's probably alluding to the so-called actually ability of BCG vaccines to as an immune modulator, actually, to improve the immunity of. So, would you recommend changing back to birth?
No,
Again,
for me, no.
Yeah. So again, I mean, we have the idea of having a possible immune modulatory effect of the vaccine is just a hypothesis, right? So it hadn't been proven yet. So until we get a proof, okay, I wouldn't change anything.
That's right. And it is very well studied to shift from birth to 6 months. So unless there is a well studied data, we cannot say we have to shift back to the previous schedule.
That requires, okay. Anyway, somebody who prefers to remain anonymous is actually asking, what are the news about COVID-19 vaccine, and is there any literature you recommend to read?
Dr. Mona.
The 1 hour talk.
Yeah. So what's up with COVID? And that's سامعيني?
Hello.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, what's up with COVID-19 vaccines? It's still ongoing. هذه مشكلة الفاكسين researchers إنهم هم يعني it's not a matter of magic. مش إنها one study نعملها وبعدين whatever results we can conclude and come up with a final outcomes ولا conclusion. المشكلة في الفاكسين research is that it has to go through phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. So they have to go through the different phases, test for safety, test for immunogenicity, and test for efficacy and effectiveness. So they have to go through the different phases. هم بيتكلموا كثير هي اللغط كثير unfortunately في الداتا في literature, but still until now we do not have a final vaccine that we have completed phase 3 and then a green light we can go ahead and give it to humans. So listen, we're still investigating them. So many of them are still in phase 2 testing for safety. ولسه phase 3 for effectiveness, for efficacy and immunogenicity are still ongoing in many of them as well. So what about literature? والله literature كتير يعني انت بس تكتب لو تكتب في PubMed vaccines and COVID-19 you're going to find tons in the literature. كان في recent paper قرأتها بس I don't have it handy on me. If you want to contact me afterwards, I can find it and give it to you. بس هو anonymous صح
Yeah, probably. If there's some way you can, both of you can post your emails, that people might actually try to communicate with.
Absolutely.
get further information about the topics you discussed today. Okay, I think there was two questions probably related together, maybe addressed to Dr. Dabba, one from Dr. Hala Yusuf and the other from Fahd Al-Abbas. And they're talking about, in order to avoid disrupting vaccinations, how about home visits for vaccination? Do you recommend implementing it as a strategy or
That's يعني فكرة ما جت في بالي حقيقة، ما عمري فكرت في الموضوع. But really we have to think of our healthcare personnel, right? So I need to protect them. يعني إذا إحنا خايفين على ال patients، إحنا خايفين على ال personnel تبعونا. So sending personnel to visit people in their homes is going to be risky to our staff. Again, maybe it has to be investigated. نشوف ال risk benefit to those people. But it's actually a very valid question I never thought of.
Okay. Hara Yusuf is to expect COVID-19 vaccine or not given if case positive when given. I'm not clear. It's not clear actually the question, but I think if you suspect somebody to be COVID-19, or in case actually if it's positive, I mean, which we probably can actually elaborate. I mean, now that we should give the vaccines, do we need to test children actually for COVID before giving it? What if happens if we give it and they're incubating the virus? If they're positive, then is there any contraindication giving the vaccine? If we're going to wait, how long to wait? I mean, these are some questions probably dealing with this issue. Can you address that, Dr. Muna?
Right. So the general idea with vaccines is that if someone is not, unless someone is severely sick, so then you delay, or if there's an absolute contraindication for receiving the vaccine, then you do not give the vaccine. But if someone is having a mild illness and you don't know if it's COVID or not COVID, وإحنا زي ما قلنا children usually if they have many of them can be asymptomatic or having very mild illnesses. So if we don't know when the patient is having very mild illness, afebrile, clinically okay, then you can proceed, I believe, with the vaccine. I mean, we follow with COVID infection, with COVID disease, whatever we follow with other infections.
And if somebody's COVID positive and you delay the vaccination, how long is it safe to delay it? I mean, 1 week, 2 weeks, what, I mean,
I don't have an exact
out of
answer.
the no symptoms, things like that.
Yeah, I don't have an exact answer, but I would say we do what we do with other infections. So until the patient has recovered and is back to his normal activity, as normal health. I don't have a specific answer, really.
Okay.
Because it is not well studied.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, probably once he's out of the woods, I mean, probably he's asymptomatic, then probably he can be given the vaccine.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Like other infections,
Yeah. If child one, I think another one, if 1 year or more give BCG or not, again, there's a question about BCG. Abdullah Nasser is giving big thanks to the speakers. For preterm infant catch-up will be calculated according to chronological or gestational age?
Chronological.
Chronological age. Okay. Anwar Adel al-Muthani. If a baby missed BCG, well, it's not missed, he's not given now BCG at birth, but and came at 6 months, does he need to have the time test, PPD, at 6 months?
According to the new schedule, no, he should just go ahead for the vaccine.
No need for BCG.
Unless he is, unless he has a high risk or a special history of exposure. We have really to have more history if he's at high risk or just he's because he's living in Saudi Arabia, so he should receive at. What do you think, Dr. Ramona? We should not investigate, isn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, unless there is an indication for investigating him.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, and otherwise, in the past we used to say around 2 months. I mean, but now actually 6 months is probably
Yes.
acceptable not to have a PPD test. Beyond that, probably it's safer to do a PPD skin test beyond 6 months. Now, I would like to thank the organizing committee. I have 2 questions to Dr. Hana. What is the maximum interval between the first and second dose and the second and the third dose of the hexavalent vaccine?
The hexavalent vaccine?
Yeah, the hexa one.
Yeah, we
Vaccine.
between the first and the second hexavalent, it is again 4 weeks and 4 weeks, but
That's the minimum.
yeah,
But
4 weeks.
is there a maximum?
The maximum, I
Yes,
think, 8. We should not exceed 8. The minimum 4 and the maximum 8. Yeah. Like the booster should be given after the last dose between the third and fourth. It is 8 weeks. So.
And the same applies between the second and third
fact,
doses?
we should not make, we should not, we should emphasize more that we have to catch up quickly. We should not speak about the maximum, always the minimum. And the quicker, the best. But if it happened that there is a delay once, we should not repeat it. If we are going to say it should be 8 weeks, like the booster, from the third to fourth, which is the fourth is the first booster, it should be 8 weeks.
So the ideal and the safe is in the catch-up 4 weeks is adequate.
Yeah, it is very safe. It is very safe. Yes.
Beyond that, it's safe, but it's not advisable. I mean,
yeah.
Because we don't want to keep delaying, or else.
Exactly.
It's gonna be.
The idea is to catch up. Exactly.
He ends school and still haven't finished. Okay. Now, if a child missed the measles vaccine at 9 months, should he receive that vaccine before MMR course? If yes, what is the minimum interval between, I don't know, internal measles and MMR vaccine?
So if he missed the dose of a 9-month measles, at what time he's going to present before the MMR?
He didn't mention about it.
Yeah, it is not mentioned. So the idea of a 9-month vaccine exactly because the baby is at risk of having the virus, and he is still young, and the mortality and the morbidity is high if he did not receive it by this age. But if he is not suffering and he did not expose to the virus, say in the last 3 months of life for the first birth date, and he is fine, so we will go ahead for the MMR by the age of 12 months, no problem. But the exact idea from the 9-month vaccination that we should really give them some immunity because they are still young. If they are exposed to the vaccine itself, it will carry a bit of morbidity. But if he is clinically fine through this time between 9 and 12 months, so it is fine. So he will go just ahead for the MMR at a 12 month, and that's it.
Yeah, I think the essence of the question was because some people sort of are very strict and stick to the schedule itself, I mean the booklet, and they'll say, okay, 9 months, if he comes at 1 year, we have to give the measles vaccines and then give the MMR.
No, actually, MMR will be enough.
I mean, the measles was put there just to protect them, so they don't catch measles before
as
1 year.
Early as possible. In fact, in the past, we are giving the measles vaccine alone by the age of 6 months. So it is immunogenic. It is immunogenic by the age of as early as 6 months. But because it is not a good having good immunity by the 6 months, they postponed it a bit to 9 months because anyway the immune system is better by the 6 month response, 9 month response rather than 6. That's why.
So measles is...
No, and the other way around, all the baby receive the 6-month vaccine will not have a full immunity. But if they receive the measles vaccine by 9 months, the immunity, the percentage of antibodies response will be better.
So only measles is mandatory. So measles only mandatory if they're under 1 year, but if he's lucky enough to go to be delayed and not catch measles, then it's okay to drop that measles and just start with the MMR directly.
Yeah. And if he is afraid from catching the measles and he wants to start it even earlier than 9 months, there is no harm to be given by 6 months. But as I said, the immunity is not that, the antibodies response, the immunogenicity is not that strong if it is given at 6 months.
And I think the second part, he probably means, let's say if measles, they came at 10 months or 11 months and got the measles vaccine, would you delay the MMR?
If he has the measles...
No, he's healthy, he had the vaccine, instead of 9 months, maybe 11 months, for example. Would you delay the MMR or just give MMR again at 1 year?
No. MMR means we are dealing with the 3 vaccines, so we should not play with the other 2. So it should be given at the same time. I mean, at the 12 months of age. We should not delay.
Because I think the interference of the measles vaccines with MMR. Anyway, the Dr. Hala Yusuf again. Now, online study. Now I think she's saying now that we already studying is happening online. So do we need to give the vaccines that are usually given before going to school? I think it's being. I think now while children are being taught online, should that impact the vaccination schedule in terms of the preschool dosaging?
Sorry, the question is not clear to me. Sorry.
I think the question
is... No,
I
think she means maybe at 6 years when we give the booster, I think, or the 6-year vaccinations just before going to school. Now, if they're not going to school, do we still need to give it or?
Yes, of course, definitely.
Okay, I think that's what she's
by booster dose, in fact, when we give a booster in the preschool group, we are just increasing the antibody response, whether they are going to the school or not. So we are just improving their immunity in general.
So the schedule should be implemented irrespective of whether they go to school or not.
Yeah. It's just its name is a preschool vaccination, but it is not related to the school itself. It's meant to be from 4 to 6 years.
Okay.
It brings us back to my presentation, right? So if we don't give the vaccines, we're opposing people to developing vaccine preventable infections.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. Again, another question about giving vaccines, influenza vaccine now, recommended? I think we sort of answered.
For me, yes, it is recommended. Influenza vaccine, it's a seasonal vaccine, and it should be given for the high-risk group at least, if the people as fear from the having the COVID and the influenza. But it is well studied and well known that it is good for everybody, especially the high-risk group. I mean, the chronic cases, asthmatic, cardiac, all the stuff we know. Isn't it?
Okay. If a child's on inhaled steroids, can we give the live vaccine for varicella? And what precautions are needed?
Inhaled steroid. The question for me or for Dr. Maha?
No, I think probably, well, it can be for both. It's a general.
Well,
if the child's on inhaled steroids,
inhaled steroid, it should not have a systemic effect. Right. In general,
not a indication for the live vaccines.
So only if it's immunosuppressed, or I mean, in
exactly.
Systemic form of.
And when we say immunosuppressive dose of steroids, we're talking about 2 milligrams per kg for more than 2 weeks.
Okay.
Dr. Muhammad, maybe the time is running.
Okay, I was going to ask about the time. When do you start? How
One
much
more question maybe we can have.
time?
The time is running out.
Okay.
just
We'll take maybe 2 more questions and then we can wrap up. Somebody's actually, we have the influenza vaccine already. How long after IVG should I delay BCG vaccine?
How long after the?
IVIG. If you're giving IG, should you, if somebody gets, I think I would imagine he means IVIG, it means probably giving it before 6 months. Should I delay the BCG vaccine?
The BCG?
Yeah, because IVGI, you delay their live attenuated immunity.
Yeah.
So if for any reason a baby is giving before the 6-month period IVIG, is that indication for delaying the BCG vaccine? And for how long?
Yes, yes. So most of the data suggest at 8 months, but I think the closest time possible is something around 6 months, but 8 months and after, because that's what we do in transplant recipients. For those who received IVIGs, we delay all vaccines, any kind of vaccine, not to be given before 8 months from IV immunoglobulins.
Probably, maybe it depends on what preparation of.
Yeah, but I mean, it's with the BCG, it's a live vaccine, so it's not much different when you talk about humoral giving immunoglobulins, IV immunoglobulins. I don't think it's going to be different, right, Dr. Prof. Farouk? Even if it's giving a live vaccine with BCG vaccine, reaction is not going to be pretty much affected. Yeah, that's what 8 months, it shouldn't be different.
No, yeah, probably okay. Now, probably this might be the last questions, and I think we're going to go to Dr. Mona. Does a child born to a mother who got COVID-19 during pregnancy considered immune to COVID-19?
Interesting question.
Yeah, interesting. So, okay, you know what? I haven't read this topic very recently, right? About maternal fetal transmission. But there is one case I'm pretty sure of where they found that COVID-19 was what is it was isolated from breast milk. Okay, so will the baby be protected? I believe it depends on the time of infection, right? Because I'm thinking of the similar scenario that we see with the varicella infection, right? So we need enough time for immunity to cross the placenta from mommy and go to the baby. So if the infection happened like 4 or 5 days or a month into delivery, okay, so the longer the time from delivery per se, the more likely that there will be antibodies from the mom that will cross the placenta and go to the baby. But if, let's say, mommy got the infection 1 day before delivery, then maybe the baby is not really much immune. And again, this brings us to the other question of whether infection with COVID-19 provides real immunity. As you know, there are some case reports in the literature that show that there are some people who got infection with COVID, who got COVID or infection with SARS-CoV-2 twice. So the suggestion is that if someone develops immunity after infection, the immunity is not going to last long. Some data suggest that it's going to last for around 4 months and then it declines. So if you're asking me about baby and mommy got SARS-CoV-2, then probably it depends on the timing. So the closer the timing to delivery, there is likely that the antibodies have crossed the placenta and reached immunogenic state in the baby. That's my thought.
And I think there's studies looking at vaccines actually showing that you're probably going to need both humoral and cellular type of protection. I think humoral on its own may not do the trick. So some of these vaccines are actually stimulating the cellular ones and may actually work better than the ones who just rely on the humoral antibody production itself. So maybe unlikely to give it. I mean, the answer probably is if there's any protection, it's going to be for the first few weeks of life, maybe for. But we're not going to. You shouldn't bet that he has protection again. Anyway, I'd like to end by thanking both of you, Dr. Hanna and Dr. Mona, for this interesting talks. Very informative and I think very timely, and actually your ability to answer a lot of these questions and to enlighten us about this. And I hope the audience would have benefited from such presentations and discussion. And as I said, I think probably if you make your emails available, I mean, people might be able through the society or through the association to communicate with them to further actually discuss these issues. And then I hand the floor back to Dr. Twim. I think you're, or are we going to end?
Okay, Dr.
We end? Okay, Dr. Twim, I think.
Thank you very much indeed. And I would like to thank the two speakers, Dr. Mona and Dr. Hana, and thank the coordinator of the club, Dr. Abdul Muin Al-Agha, and our moderator, Dr. Muhammad Farouk, for this interesting actually webinar. Thank also for this sponsoring company, for JSK, and for Event Troop for organizing this event. There is many requests actually I can see in the chat where they want the new guidelines to be probably finalized and to be, and we can do it actually and put it on our Saudi Pediatric Association website, or send it also to our data bank mails, because there is a lot of changes. So please, I will ask the two speakers and to be reviewed by Dr. Muhammad Farouk. Please look us for the updated and the final vaccination guideline in Saudi Arabia, which is approved by Ministry of Health. Send it to us as by you three, and we will send it to the scientific committee in the SBA to be approved, and then we'll put it on the website and send it also to all our available emails. With this, I would like to thank you all, and inshallah we'll see you again in another webinar meeting organized by Saudi Pediatric Association. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you.